Here we are with arguably the best political tag team on TV. Dr. PLO Lumumba on the far end, and Barack Maluka, who has reminded me just now, actually, he doesn't talk very much. He's a PhD now, so it's doctor and doctor.
You know, that lizard that jumped from the Iroko tree said he would praise himself if people like you did not praise him.
Right,
yeah?
Yes.
So the only reason I did a PhD was so that people like you can refer to me as doctor. Nothing else.
Dr. P, I have no comeback.
But he should tell you that I'm the one who insisted.
Oh, absolutely. He's the one who insisted that I must do that PhD, and it took me 8 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and well done, Dr. Ari, for encouraging him. So it's doctor and doctor. Wow. That's why I call it the best political tag team on TV. Dr. P, let me start with you. The presidency. Is it over now? The marriage between the president, is it over now? Is it a foregone conclusion?
Jeff, why do you invite me to flog a dead horse? I think the evidence that is available to all and sundry indicates quite clearly that the President of the Republic and his deputy are not reading from the same script. It is a sad reality, particularly at this moment in the history of our country, because it is important, particularly in these nascent democracies, that those who are in the upper echelon of the political ladder read from the same script, because it then gives confidence to the people. But you asked a direct question. My direct answer is, it would appear to me that they have crossed the Rubicon and burnt their boots.
Crossed the Rubicon. Dr. Barack, listen, so it happened on a weekend. The president calls in editors to State House and indirectly tells his deputy, why don't you resign? Step aside.
First, he shouldn't have done that. If I was his communications advisor, I would tell him that as president, you don't call 4, 5, 6 editors and through them to elocute your message to your deputy president. You summon your deputy president to State House and you tell him that I want you to resign. Now, these two, however, joined at the hip by virtue of the constitutional arrangement that we have. And I think that the deputy president is having a ball. He's really feeling very nice about this whole thing and literally daring them to do their worst, which unfortunately they are not able to do. So he will be dancing around them for quite some time. And you asked Professor PLO whether it was dead between those two. The presidency was dead. The thing is that this country is shipwrecked. Government is shipwrecked. The captain summons the deputy captain through proxy, to tell him through proxy to step aside. But the ship is shipwrecked. The vessel is shipwrecked. It doesn't matter whether it has sunk or it is still floating. It is shipwrecked. And all that comes out of it is flotsam. You know, the debris that comes out of a ship that is shipwrecked. Anyone who finds it can claim it. Odinga can claim it. Mudavadi can claim it. Kalonzo Musyoka can claim it. No wonder they tell the deputy president to step aside. The opposition is also shipwrecked. A functional opposition would be telling the president and his deputy that you have failed. Step aside and allow us to give the country a new government. But they are not doing that. Instead, you see them behaving as if they are also inside us in government, losing and missing the best opportunity to tell this government that you have lost it.
Yeah. Prof, Immediately following the president's interview with the editors, the deputy president came back. He came back almost immediately and said, "I'm on a mission. I can't surrender."
You know, if these were light issues, we would talk about them lightly. If it was their lives that they were playing Russian roulette with, we would not care. But to the extent that their actions and inactions have implications on the lives of Kenyans, we ought to be very worried. Because what we see here is what in diplomacy would be called saber-rattling diplomacy. The president and the deputy are daggers drawn, and they are daring each other. And what that has then engendered in the running of the government is indiscipline. And that indiscipline is manifest everywhere. If I was speaking from a textbook standpoint, would have asked Deputy President William Ruto to resign. But yet I understand why he does not resign. Because by continuing to serve in government, he immunizes himself from any machinations that may be thought out or thought about by the presidency. So it is a matter of strategy that he chooses to remain where he is. But the question that you are not asking, which must be asked and answered, what are the implications for the nation? As we speak now, if you are speaking in Greek of old, you would say that the country is between the Scylla and the Charybdis, between the rock and the hard place, between the devil and the deep blue sea. Why do I say so? You see what is happening in Laikipia, the abject abandon with which individuals or groups that are Christian bandits are running riot in that part of the world. You see your president and my president declaring a state of emergency because there is drought. You see your minister for health waxing eloquent on television telling us to keep the COVID protocols. But you see the abject abandon with which the politicians ignore him without consequence. When a country is moving in that direction, it behooves us of goodwill to speak until the scales in their eyes drop and until the wax in their ears melt. But easier said than done.
Very good point. Between the sea and Charybdis, you said?
The Scylla and the Charybdis.
Yes,
The devil in the deep blue sea.
the rock and the hard place.
Indeed.
That is
Okay, so the frustrations, for lack of a better word, continue. Remove GSU, replace with APs.
It's a game of musical chairs, and the DP has perfected the art of turning every disadvantage into an advantage. You take away the GSU, you give him the APs. He has a tea party with the APs the next morning, and it's all camaraderie. He's in fact telling you that I can also do with the G4S if you so desire. It's a completely different kind of dispensation. And I think it is largely also a factor of the reality that we haven't quite come to terms with the fact that we have a different constitutional dispensation. It is a dispensation that allows a lot of latitude that was not there in other constitutional dispensations before. And they are the kinds of latitudes that also call for a lot of responsible behavior and conduct. Because when we promulgated the Constitution of Kenya 2010, we were coming from a historical place. There were lessons that we had taken in history about arbitrary use and abuse of power, particularly by the national CEO. And we wanted to make it a little more difficult for the national CEO to behave the way they had behaved before. It's a delicate balancing act on the part of the president, on the part of the person who becomes the deputy president. And therefore, in a sense, the constitution is also being tested to see whether it can work. Yes, we are seeing that the constitution can bite, but the constitutional dispensation also assumes that the people, men and women, who are going to occupy those offices are going to exercise self-discipline, which unfortunately is not there. That's why the sorts of things that Professor PLO is talking about obtain in the country, that His Excellency the President himself will say that no more political meetings, and the following day he will have one himself. No more political meetings, and the next day the Deputy President will have one. No more political meetings, the political opposition will be there. And even we in the media, I keep on saying we in the media because I consider myself to be a member of this fraternity. Indeed. We will also lament, but the following day we go out and give them glowing coverage. If we were to give Dr. Ruto a blackout, give Mr. Odinga a blackout, Mr. Mudavadi a blackout, even the church, you see them coming out and saying, please obey the protocol. And they receive them, they surrender the pulpit, they greet them with supported hands, they give them the front rows. They are not ordinary worshippers. And the media is there with the cameras. They're beaming, sometimes bringing them to our sitting rooms live. We must ask ourselves where we have fallen short, all of us.
Prof, I see you nodding there. You agree with this? Are we to blame?
If Barack, and you allow me to be a little melodramatic, there is a sense in which while we have a new constitutional dispensation, we came from the Egypt of yesterday physically, but Egypt is still resident in us. And this is manifest in the behavior of the political class. There are individuals who have been in the political class since the 1980s, and it is their stock in trade that they poo-poo everything that is said, even when it makes sense. And we see this on a daily basis with regard to COVID. We see this with the abject abandon with which they conduct their affairs. We see this, and Barack, you will remember, in the year 2008, through your institution, Mvule, you published a book written by Koigi Wawamwere towards genocide in Kenya, the curse of negative ethnicity. Yep. It is a book that I commend to every Kenyan at this point in our history. Because what one sees is a political class that doesn't care about the population. It is a population that is zombified and hypnotized by the political class. It is a press that is idolizing. It is a church, particularly the Christian churches, that are worshiping Latter-day Bulls, and as he said, allow politicians to desecrate the pulpit. And there is a sense in which the country has reached a stage where sense does not make sense. It is a country where greed is our creed, and that is a dangerous place to be at. And as we approach the elections, and we must talk about this very early on, you can already see the drums of war being beaten. And there is a sense of deja vu. When I see what is happening in Laikipia, I can remember in 1992 and 1997, it started this way, and then it snowballed. And before we knew it, we were enveloped into a whirlpool from which I dare say we have never recovered.
Prof, you're so right. We are so myopic sometimes. We are so myopic. And Dr. Barrett, let me ask you this. It looks like that one side of Jubilee is throwing everything at the deputy president. Look at C.S. Matiang'i going out in front of a parliamentary committee saying, oh, deputy president, he has most security, 257 guards. Oh, he has built himself a vast empire. So they're throwing the kitchen sink at him now. Raphael Tuju a few days later saying, oh, it's great that he's making 1.5 million shillings a day on eggs as he paid his taxes. So it looks like, the gloves are literally off.
It is a good revelation. And I would want to see more of those kinds of revelatory moments and
like
activities.
lifestyle audits?
Lifestyle audits. But I would like to see them across the board. I would like to see and to know who else owns what. I would like to know where they got it. And I would like to know whether they are paying taxes or not. I would like to know who allocates the security detail to each one of these fellows. I don't know, for example, whether the deputy president picks up the phone and summons certain members of the GSU to his residence or to his egg farms. There is a sense in which we lose the plot. And we start actually parroting about the whole thing like popinjays in a manner that clearly indicates we have not reflected about this thing. And even when such a very frightful thing like stoning the deputy president's motorcade happens, we start treating it as normal. And when I saw that happening, I got very afraid. I said, the next thing we are likely to see is somebody stoning the president's motorcade. What happens? Are we replaying 1969 again? Do we really know what we are doing? And it starts with the alpha political class up there, the mutual exchanges. Because when you talk about throwing the kitchen wash basin at the deputy president, these basins are actually being flung from all directions. And that's what I mean when I say that we are shipwrecked. And this government has gone beyond its sell-by debt. If there was an opposition that could pressurize, it would be telling them to step down, to go home. They have forgotten why Kenyans elected them. They have forgotten what their mandate is. The president who should be in charge as the person who occupies the one institution that symbolizes national unity has himself played the politics of division. And once the presidency has collapsed, because the presidency has collapsed, I can look in that camera and tell the occupants of the presidency that the presidency has collapsed. The executive has collapsed. There are no cabinet meetings. The cabinet is informed with mutual internal suspicion. They ought to step aside. And it's only the opposition which can organize itself and pressurize them either to cohere and do what they are supposed to do or to step aside altogether. And yet the political opposition has lined itself up waiting to be blessed by the president so that it can take over. And that president, instead of going back to his party and telling members of his party that our deputy has become truant, let us find a way, even as a party, of separating ourselves from him if they have the ability and the proclivity. He goes to the political opposition to tell them to come together. I've never seen anything like that.
Barack, if you permit me,
Yes.
there is a sense in which we could say that under the new political dispensation, the tantrums we see now, juvenile, adolescent tantrums that may accompany a new political dispensation. But I think we've been here for long. And part of the Kenyan problem, as I see it, and I can't be contradicted on this, is that we have, and I've said this before, that we are in the business, if we want to be metaphorical about it, that we keep on changing the forests to mean political parties, but the monkeys remain the same with their old habits. So you have every election cycle a group of individuals who are the political kingpins migrating. The migratory nature of the Kenyan politician is legendary and without compare in the continent of Africa. So they move from a thing that is called the party A to a thing that is called the party B to a thing that is called the party C. So I think it is insult to the English word political party to describe the contraption that we have in Kenya's political parties. They are vehicles that are crafted periodically and are animated by ethnicization of those contraptions for purposes of competing for political office. When a country finds ourselves in such a situation, what suffers at the very outset is objectivity. The other thing that suffers is ideas. Julius Nyerere used to put it very well, that when a leadership becomes bankrupt of ideas, then what they do is that they have body-shifting things that they call political parties, and then they mobilize ethnically and mobilize religiously. And you don't listen. I don't listen to the Kenyan politician when they are on the podium, when they are reading speeches written for them. No. Listen to them at the funerals that they attend as a matter of course. Listen to them in the unguarded moments when they speak from their hearts. And that tells you. Listen to what is happening, which annoys me to no end and should annoy every Kenyan. Mount Kenya, Nyanza, Western. Nobody talks about Kenya. We are talking about the regionalization, the ethnicization of our agenda. And when they talk about agriculture, they talk about health, they talk about education, is simply because that is the darn thing in 21st century political discourse. But it is skin deep. It is a thin veneer. It is a moral fig leaf that they use to hide their political nakedness. And this is what we should expose when we have opportunity to do so, and we expose it, Jeff. Because, as they say in Kiswahili, mtego wa panya huingia waliomo na wasiokuwemo. We may not be at the center of the politics of it, but when they succeed in messing up this country, it is your children and children's children who will suffer. There is enough history in the region to tell us that. But they don't hear. Yeah. As I said a little earlier, and I say so ad nauseum, the scales of ambition have clouded their vision. The wax of material wealth has blocked their ears. What shall we do?
Prof, real quick, remember the bromance that was between the two? Just matching shirts, matching ties. We bought all that in 2013. Was it from the start? Was it a mismatch? Was it a...
Barack, you will correct me as a student of literature. I do not know who said it. But it was said that in a marriage of convenience, the couples sleep on the same bed, but they have different dreams. Permit me to say that it was a marriage of convenience, and the couples each had different dreams. But what is done in darkness, as the good book says, now manifests in broad daylight, and we are beholding it to our detriment, to our anger. This is what is happening. We cannot sugarcoat it anymore. It is self-evident.
You agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the marriage between Mark Antony and Caesar's sister. It's a marriage of convenience. The two were never together. The two were completely different continents of thought, of vision, self-focused vision, but completely apart. And one was using the other one as a horse, riding on the back to where he wanted to go. And the other one was hoping that he would also ride on this horse in the future. But the horse rider, having crossed the Rubicon twice, decided that it was done. And we must ask ourselves the question, what is it that is going on in government? When President Uhuru Kenyatta, His Excellency the President, says it is about the baton, and instead of him waiting there for the baton, he has come for the baton. He's saying that whatever it is we are doing in government, whatever it is I'm doing in government, he wants to be also doing it. He's not waiting for the day when I will finish doing it, good or bad, so that it can become his turn. And when I look at this government, the thing that I see in this government is graft. And because of graft, we have spent 4 years focused on an individual, fighting an individual. That is the agenda of government, making the individual an election issue. And I've kept saying that if this individual is these things you're saying he is, we must have laws, regulations, and procedures of addressing that matter so that we can put it.
You know what they say, gentlemen, there's no honor among
thieves.
Among thieves. Among thieves.
Barack is making a point there, which he'll conclude before I interrupt him. He was making a point, but this thought came when he talks about having a raft of laws that lends itself to being used to deal with people who are errant. Because when individuals are errant within a governmental system, they harm the population. And we saw this in South Africa, when it was thought, rightly or wrongly, at a certain stage that Thabo Mbeki was not conducting himself properly. The machinery was deployed to truncate his tenure. The same we also saw in the case of former President Jacob Zuma. What we are telling ourselves and what we are being told in this country is that when you occupy political office, you are by that very fact immune from the legal process. And that is a bad thing. It is a bad thing because as I speak to you now, this country is punching below her weight economically, politically, and otherwise. And I believe that we'll have occasion to ask ourselves, how can you have a country? If you read the newspapers today, a country in which if you read her newspapers today, you would think that we have an elections next week. We have elections next week, which tells one story. If I'm an investor, I would postpone my investment decision in this country until the year 2024. So there would be no employment, which tells an investor that this is not the place to go, which means that we are suffering, our agriculture is suffering, which means that our employment and manufacturing sector is suffering. But what do we hear from the political class? Even the clergy. I remember, I was old enough to remember, when if the Catholic Church issued a letter, the country would come to a standstill. Today, we have individuals who wear the dog's collar, who, when they sight a politician, they tremble and quake in their boots. That is how far we have sunk. And this has happened because indiscipline has become the culture of this nation. Democracy presupposes a number of things. One, the maturity of the masses. Two, a leadership that knows where it wants to take the people. And three, discipline as the DNA in running the government. All those ingredients have disappeared without a whimper.
Gentlemen, I want to take a quick break. This is too much English for me. This is incredible. This is an interview you're going to be wanting to play over and over and over again. Because when Professor PLO Lumumba shows up, and now Dr. Barack Muluka, listen to him also. No doubt the best political tag team on TV. Gentlemen, when I come back, the Uhuru succession. It's the usual suspects. What is that about? And we're here watching like we're on the sidelines of a Shakespearean thingy-majig. I'm out of English. Let's take a break. JKLive will be back in a moment.